With spring football opening, Eli Drinkwitz says he's looking forward to the quarterback competition. Is that a real competition? Is Sam Horn involved? Let's talk about that in basketball too. Right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on today's show, I want to talk more about Trent Burns, or as he described himself recently, a very large human, probably the understatement of the decade there from Mr. Burns. But also, hey, one starter has already been decided on the defensive side of the ball. A newcomer is locked into a starting position, according to Eli Drinkwitz. And you know what? Before I talk about this quarterback competition, I do want to start the show by quickly telling you about a 5-hour energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back, and no fork required. Vanilla-y, cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Guys, 5-hour energy. Did I really need the Y at the end of that copy? Okay, I'll take it up with them off of air. But you know what? Eli Drinkwitz opened up talking for a bit yesterday, for maybe a couple minutes, a bit of a opening soliloquy from Eli, as he likes to start off his press conferences. But as you might imagine, the first question was about Austin Simmons, and Drinkwitz was quick to turn it into a quarterback competition, saying that's what he is looking forward to. And you look at the roster right now, who are the men in said competition? Of course, Ole Miss transfer Austin Simmons. You gotta assume that he's the starter at this point, much as, well, I was assuming Bo Prabula was at this point, and I think I'm probably more confident at this point that Simmons will be your starter, even more so, I should say. But of course, you're returning a true sophomore. Matt Zollers is in the fold as well. You've got another transfer in UConn's Nick Evers, and it is pronounced Evers, I do believe, by all accounts, not Evers. So it looks to me like he's more of a backup and depth piece, but then you've got Gavin Sidwar, yet another Pennsylvania guy following in the footsteps of Matt Zollers and Bo Prabula. But Gavin Sidwar, the true freshman from the state of PA, well, one of 15 recruits who enrolled early for the Tigers last month, according to Power Mizzou. And also Sam Horn, still on the roster as well, at least for now, because I thought it was really notable that Eli Drinkwitz didn't mention Sam Horn as one of the guys in that competition. The previous four guys were specifically mentioned. The fact that Sam Horn was not, that tells me he is probably not going to be on the Missouri football roster come this fall. Understandably so, by the way. The Los Angeles Dodgers made a pretty significant investment of about $500,000 or so for Horn, who was a pretty late draft pick for that investment. So it makes sense for a whole bunch of reasons for him to move on here. So to me, that means for Missouri and Austin Simmons, realistically, I think Matt Zollers is the only real competition here. I just believe that. I think, frankly, if Nick Evers from UConn, if he were a starting level quarterback at this level, he may have found a different landing spot, to be brutally honest with you. Maybe he'll go out there and prove me wrong, but I think Zollers is the type of player. He certainly has the type of high school pedigree and upside, just the athletic pedigree, the type of pedigree that Austin Simmons has, honestly. But again, I just think Zollers has a ways to go in certain parts of his game, and I just think if Missouri wasn't pretty confident what they had in Austin Simmons, it wouldn't have struck so early in the portal process with, and obviously a significant investment there as well. And just generally speaking, you know, Eli Drinkwitz talked about what I've talked about this offseason with the Missouri passing game. He said, quote, We had too much reliance on the run game when we weren't able to exploit the one-on-one opportunities that we had. For us, that's really what we have to figure out this spring. And to me, three things were at play with the Missouri passing game that have to improve. Quicker decisions at quarterback, and that doesn't just include where to throw the ball, but also recognizing blitzes and then recognizing, of course, hot reads that are based upon extra blitzers coming. And also, of course, with that comes the Missouri offensive line and the blocking scheme. And, of course, the running backs and tight ends who stay in to block as well. All of those players need to be on the same page and communicate. And then finally, it's about wide receivers, of course, being able to win matchups, whether it is actually getting open, shaking somebody and getting space, or it's more of a Donovan Olubade type thing, which you saw a bunch of times last season where it may not look like he's open, but if it's one-on-one, he's sometimes always open, it would seem, because he outjumps the opposition for the football. Drinkwitz continues here. He says, excited about the quarterback competition we're going to have this year. Obviously, I think Matt did an excellent job with his opportunity as a freshman. He was thrown into some unadvantageous situations, and he handled himself remarkably well. The goal for him is to be the very best quarterback he can be, compete every single day, yada, yada, yada. He just has to continue to grow and develop. That's the plan for him. So obviously, I think Drinkwitz is trying to keep Matt Zoller's head in this competition. I don't think by any means he wants Austin Simmons to just assume that he has the job. But here's the good news. According to Drinkwitz, he says, I think Austin Simmons is, quote, very competitive in nature. And I tell you, one thing, I did an interview with Simmons a few weeks ago, and when I asked him, I left it very open-ended and said, hey, how was that whole Trinidad Chambliss situation where you got injured, he comes in and balls out and keeps the job? What was that like for you? And I left it open-ended because, quite simply, I don't like putting words in people's mouths. But I did notice that there was a bit of an edge to Austin's answer to that question. I thought that was maybe the most notable part of the interview. And it's not that he was mad at me for asking the question or anything like that. I just could feel that competitive fire in him bubbling to the surface. He just, paused for a second and said, I mean, how would you feel? That type of thing. So I thought it was a bit of a revealing answer there from Simmons in a positive way. As Drinkwitz says, he's a very competitive guy by nature, a kid who's comes from a football household, by the way. So no big surprise there. And by the way, speaking of Ole Miss transfers, well, one of them has already secured a starting job. It's not Austin Simmons, at least not according to Eli Drinkwitz, but another Ole Miss transfer on the other side of the football has already secured a starting position. So that's impressive to see from that guy's perspective. And, well, we'll see if any other spots are locked down here in spring football. But you know what? Coming up on the show, more football, more basketball as well. But you know what? Before I get there, I do have to tell you about 5 Hour Energy, because with 15 different flavors to choose from, well, you can basically have yourself a draft of 5 Hour Energy flavors. If I were a GM, I would definitely be taking watermelon #1 overall. It's cool, it's crisp, and it's caffeinated. You can't beat that. Oh, wait, actually you can, when it has 0 sugar. So I'll tell you this, find your new flavor, whether you agree with me, maybe it's watermelon, maybe it's one of their, again, more than a dozen other options. Find your new favorite flavor at 5 Hour Energy Shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. And by Game Time, where the biggest stretch of college basketball is here. We're talking buzzer beaters, bracket busters, the whole deal. And the best part, well, Game Time is going to make getting tickets a heck of a lot easier. No long queues, no prices jumping all over the place, no surprise fees at checkout. And if you're looking to tickets to the Missouri-Arkansas game, the final home game of the season, Senior Day, well, suddenly the Tigers looking a lot more popular, aren't they? People hopping on the bandwagon here as March approaches, and I approve. No gatekeeping here on the Locked On Mizzou podcast. So check out Zone Deals, by the way. They let you pick the section and save even more while Game Time selects the seats. So take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And get Locked On Mizzou ad-free with the Everydayer Club. Plus, members-only Discord access. Join at lockedonmizzou.supercast.com. And I have to say, I was a little surprised that Eli Drinkwitz announced a starter at corner already. At least one of the cornerback positions, Chris Graves Jr. from Ole Miss, will be one of Missouri's starting cornerbacks. And, of course, Missouri has a lot of other options at the position as well after losing Toriano Pride, after losing Stephen Hall, after losing Dre Norwood. Missouri's three top corners in snaps by far, all off of the roster. So much to replace there. So I almost wonder if there's a little bit of, hey, confidence building there on the defense, maybe just from the fans' perspective from Drinkwitz, because obviously it's not really his modus operandi to name a starter at a competitive position at this point in the season. Clearly, if he's not going to do it at quarterback, why would he do it at cornerback? Well, I think maybe because the point is, hey, you've got 2 or 3 spots you absolutely have to have. You have to have 3 corners at the very least at this day and age, play quite a bit with as many receivers are out there. You got to match up with them one way or the other. So I think it's a little bit different than quarterback, obviously, to make an obvious statement there. So a little bit of confidence there on the outside with Chris Graves being shown. And I have to say, I just feel good about the Missouri defense coming into this season just based on coaching as much as anything, despite the fact that Missouri has so many new faces on this defense. But you know what? I'll talk some more football here to close out the program. But let's transition to the hardwood for a little bit, because obviously Missouri playing Mississippi State tomorrow. And as I said on yesterday's program, Josh Hubbard, such a good scorer, especially when he's hot. There's not much you can do about it. But a guy who is 5'10", let's say 6 feet tall, very generously, a guy who works very hard offensively off of the ball too. As I've said, make him work. If you're T.O. Barrett in particular, if you're able to make Hubbard work on defense, I think you can make his effectiveness offensively go down quite a bit. And if I'm a Mississippi State fan, if I'm Chris Jans, if I'm their head coach, I'm asking myself, if Hubbard doesn't get going, what's the backup plan? Because this is the second worst scoring team in the SEC in conference play. So for the millionth time, we got to make Josh Hubbard work tomorrow. And if the Tennessee guards weren't big enough to match up with T.O. Barrett, if Missouri can get Hubbard onto Barrett, well, once again, that's an advantageous matchup, I think, again, on a couple of different levels. And I got to say, I'm really happy for Trent Burns, just on a human level. And, of course, on a Missouri fan level, he's been a real asset for the Tigers here the past few ball games. And just on a human level, you got to feel good for the guy, in my opinion. And one thing I like just from a basketball perspective, Burns had a quote here recently. He said, "I'm a pretty large human, so I just try to take up space. I tried to really slow the head of the snake against Vanderbilt down and just show a body in front of them. When guards may have gotten beat, I just showed a body to make the ball handler second guess. That's really all I try to do. Be in the right spots, just keep the offense moving, and try to do things to help us win." Hey, Trent, that is absolutely the ticket. That's the right attitude for him to have defensively. Be in the right spots, just take up space, and he can be a massive asset defensively. And Dennis Gates gave him credit for receiving coaching better recently. In other words, hey, Dennis Gates, a nice guy by all accounts, but a guy who will coach you hard too. And he certainly has been coaching Trent Burns hard, and I think all of that is paying. I think Burns has said he's realized how to take it better. And man, you really got to feel good for a guy who sat out last season, sat out the beginning of this season. He was saying, hey, it was getting up to the 600-day mark since I had played an actual basketball game. And I'll just say, as he said, I'm a pretty large human being. Well, I'm a pretty large human being as well. And I just remember being 15 years old, and all of a sudden I'm taller than my teachers and my parents and all their friends and all this stuff, and feeling a little bit awkward. And Trent Burns is obviously not 15, but what is he, 19, 20 years old, something like that? Not that far removed from those days. And being 7'5", I can't imagine what that's like. It can't be the best thing in the world. And frankly, the best thing about being 7'5" is playing basketball. So when you have to go more than a year without having to do that had to suck for him, is the really obvious point to make there. So good for him is what I'm trying to say. And good for us as Missouri fans. I think his patience is paying off for us as well. And back to the football side, as there were some notable injury updates from Eli Drinkwitz as he spoke to the media yesterday, I believe, or perhaps it was this morning. I've completely lost track of time, but that's okay. What's also okay is that Blake Craig, the Missouri place kicker who tore his ACL on a tackle attempt on the kickoff first game of the season last year, well, he's going to be limited this spring, but is expected to be a full go by the start of fall camp. Drinkwitz said he'll get some work. We just won't ask him to kick a lot of long yardage stuff at this point. So far, so good for Blake Craig. As I've said before, for you everydayers out there, I'm just not quite sure what to expect from Blake Craig as far as his recovery from injury. I just don't know a lot of examples of place kickers tearing their ACL, to be honest with you. Well, you'll have to help me out on that one. Maybe this is some research. Let's put that in the notes. And also, is it better to tear your ACL on your plant leg or your kicking leg? Because I could see an argument for either one of those. And speaking of knowledge that I wasn't really aware of, Shaun Terry, well, apparently he was hampered last season by a knee injury last spring, by the way, and never really got fully recovered from that. So he was a guy who just had incredibly explosive high school film that you thought, maybe he can be an addition in the punt return, kick return game at the very least. Drinkwitz says he's having an unbelievable offseason so far, and I'm really excited about him. So that's interesting to hear about. Again, Missouri can use obviously as many explosive playmakers as it could possibly get. Maybe Terry is one to watch here coming into what I believe should be his redshirt freshman season. And coming up, more of Eli Drinkwitz's remarks, including pushing Ahmad Hardy even harder into greater heights by somewhat not calling him out in the media, but at the very least saying, hey, there's some things he needs to improve on. Yes, maybe Missouri's best player last season can get even better. Plus a guy I think is a dark horse on the Missouri roster to make the NFL in 2027. Let's talk about him and more coming up in just a little bit. But you know what? Coast Pay is giving Locked On College listeners up to $2,000 credit for your business when you get started today. And if you're a blue-collar worker, maybe you own a business that has any type of operation with trucks on the road, you manage a crew, I'm telling you, you're going to like this, because Coast Pay is the modern fuel card and expense management tool built specifically for fleets, fuel, maintenance, materials, all on one card with real control and instant visibility. Every transaction shows up the moment it happens, no surprises. If someone fuels up at an odd time or tries to buy something outside their limit, you'll know instantly. And when you're sharing cards, sharing PIN numbers with your employees, well, it's easy to figure out how that can get a little bit hairy quickly. Forget about all that stuff, because right now Coast Pay is offering our listeners up to $2,000 credit when you get started at coastpay.com/lockedoncollege. Go to coastpay.com/lockedoncollege to see how you can earn up to $2,000 credit. Terms apply. The Coast Visa commercial credit card is issued by Celtic Bank. All card accounts are subject to credit approval. And also, before I forget, one other injury note for the Tigers from Drinkwitz. Logan Reichert, just a massive offensive line prospect from a few seasons ago, the class of 23 high school class. 6'6", 344 is what he was listed, at least coming out of high school. I don't know what his current measurements are. Out of Raytown, by the way. Well, Reichert apparently is finally healthy for maybe the first time in a long time, according to Drinkwitz. So a redshirt junior at this point is Logan Reichert. Still enough time for his rather massive potential to possibly pay off. And Drinkwitz called a couple positions on the roster premier. One isn't too surprising, the running back position with, of course, Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts. One that surprised me, though, was calling the tight end room premier. Certainly a room that Missouri was rock solid in, with Brett Norfleet and Jordan Harris, two guys who complement each other's skill sets very well. In fact, I think Jordan Harris is a guy who's a dark horse to play in the NFL in 2027. He really is that good of a blocker and a guy who can at least catch the ball out in space. You're not going to ask him to be Travis Kelce or Tony Gonzalez or even Brett Norfleet for that matter. So that's why I think those two guys do complement each other really well. And when it comes to receiving the football, Norfleet can basically do it all when he's healthy. Can Norfleet have an entire season of health? If it does, that'll go a long way for his NFL prospects, obviously, as well. And Ahmad Hardy, clearly an NFL prospect at this point, but Eli Drinkwitz not afraid to push him in the media or behind the scenes. Drinkwitz says, quote, he understands that to whom much is given, much is required. He needs to be better in his sleep habits and nutrition habits and his approach to his day in, day out life. I think he's understanding that this is an opportunity for him to really invest himself, his future, and his family's future if he does everything right. So I don't know, maybe he's worried about his hips doing all that horseback riding or something like that when it comes to his day in, day out life. Ahmad Hardy doesn't really strike me as the, I don't know, Michael Irvin in college, let's put in the 1980s, let's put it that way. But hey, obviously you just got to keep pushing. And if Ahmad Hardy can improve himself with getting a solid 8 hours and a little bit of chicken and rice versus Wendy's or whatever his thing might be, that's obviously a good thing, because Hardy was incredible last season. I feel like I was really riding the hype train hard in the previous offseason for Ahmad Hardy, and I think he shattered even my highest expectations. So you know what? Hopefully I've at least met your expectations on this edition of Locked On Mizzou. By the way, do check out the Everydayer Club, and also thanks for checking out my social media as well, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that stuff at Locked On Mizzou. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Mizzou ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and more. It's lockedonmizzou.supercast.com. And for those on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On College Basketball. And I am John Miller. I'll see you tomorrow.